Hello guys and welcome to this video. Here are 6 heartwarming stories found on askreddit. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Let's go. A few years ago my boyfriend and I were handing out candy on Halloween night. We were running low so my boyfriend left to go buy more. A few minutes after he left the house he called me and told me that a little kid with the best train costume ever would be coming to the door soon, but that he's Oliver and not Thomas the Tank Engine. The kid had been crying to his dad that everyone thought he was Thomas the Tank Engine. A few minutes later the kid shows up in the coolest train costume ever. The costume is made out of cardboard, and it's literally the whole train with the kid in the middle. It even had an area in the chimney spout that opened and you put the candy in. I opened the door and I'm all like OMG Oliver the Tank Engine. I love Oliver, he's my favorite. And the kid just loosed it. So did his dad. He was so freaking happy that I knew he was Oliver and not Thomas. His dad was filming everything and looked so happy, shocked that I knew he was Oliver. As they were walking away I kept hearing the kid say to his dad, "She knew I was Oliver. She knew I was Oliver." I fucking closed the door and cried. It was so precious. I was a telephone repairman back in the 80s. One Halloween evening I was sent out on a minor repair that, based on the reported issue, would take about 10 minutes to fix, and it was to be my last repair of the day. I arrived at an upscale house in an upscale neighborhood just after sunset. I put on my tool belt and made my way up the long driveway, standard in that area, and knocked. Excited shouting from inside the house, the door flew open, and the whole family was there with a huge basket of candy and expectant faces, that dropped into disappointment when they saw that it was just the phoneman. I learned that they were recent immigrants from Korea and had been very much looking forward to celebrating their very first Halloween ever, but that I was the only person that had come to the door. The family was heartbroken. I finished my task and wished them good luck, then got in my truck and went hunting. A couple of streets down, I found a pack of about 15 to 20 trick-or-treaters with 5 or 6 parents, pulled up and walked over to talk to the adults. I told them about the family I just left, gave them the address, and headed back to the office. The next day at the end of my shift, I was called into my supervisor's office. Turns out, one of the parents told the father of our meeting, and he called in to ask that his gratitude be expressed to me, my boss, his boss, and as many bosses up the line as possible. Looked like I got a Halloween treat as well. One time I got invited to spend the night at a popular girl's house. I think her parents made her invite me. I knew she liked playing hide and go seek from listening to conversations she had with her real friends, so I was determined to play the best game she's ever played. She hid first and I found her relatively fast. Then I hid. I climbed into the bottom of a closet in their basement and covered myself up with the contents of said closet. Then I promptly fell asleep. I woke up hours later after the police had been called and they were outside searching the neighborhood. I was never invited back. Still the best nap I ever had. My grandpa died in 2020 and I've been trying to remember all the stories I have of him. This is my favorite. I was around 8 with my dad and grandpa on the back porch observing as they tried to get the propane grill to start. They couldn't figure out how to light it. Eventually my grandpa lit a match and all the propane that had accumulated in the grill while they were troubleshooting ignited into a giant fireball. The 3 of us jumped backwards. Thankfully nobody was hurt, just completely stunned. After a few seconds, my dad looked at my grandpa, then they both looked at me. My dad leaned down to me and said, "Don't tell your mother, or your grandmother." A long while ago now my partner's grandma passed away at a grand old age. Her husband had passed away over a decade previously and been buried at their local cemetery, and she'd always made it clear that when she died, she wanted to be cremated and her ashes buried in her husband's grave. Her will also clearly stated this. Her daughter partner's Aunt Sarah had her cremated as per her wishes, and then contacted the cemetery authority to discuss burying her in her husband's grave. The cemetery authorities then told Aunt Sarah that legally this would count as opening the grave, and therefore there would be a substantial 4-figure fee to be able to do it. Aunt Sarah was horrified because, with the grandma's money tied up in probate long-term due to the nature of some of her assets, Sarah had already had to remortgage her own house to give grandma the funeral she had wanted, so she just didn't have the money. She got very upset at not being able to honor her mother's wishes, or having to wait however long it was going to take for the money to clear while grandma sat in an urn on the mantelpiece away from her husband. She confided in her sons, my partner's cousins. They said, "Leave it to us, Mum." At 3 in the morning the following day, my partner and his cousins climbed over the graveyard wall with a ladder, a shovel, an old bedsheet, a flower wreath and grandma's ashes. They found granddad's grave in the dark, very carefully removed a square of turf, dug about a foot and a bit down, laying the displaced soil on the old bedsheet so it wouldn't leave signs on the grass, laid grandma to rest with her husband, very carefully refilled the hole, put the square of turf back over the tip and put the wreath over the turf to help disguise the fact it had been disturbed, then took the ladder and got out back over the graveyard wall. The next morning they told Aunt Sarah, and she cried with relief. We all went up to Granddad's grave, held an informal goodbye service and laid a lot more flowers for the both of them. The cemetery authorities later got in touch with Aunt Sarah and asked if she wanted to go ahead with opening the grave, and she told them actually she thought Grandma was quite happy where she was already resting. Grandma had been quite stingy and quite naughty in a really fun way too. None of us had any doubt she would have 100% approved of the way she was laid to rest. I was traveling from Japan to Brazil. Before boarding, the staff asked for volunteers to stay. They oversold or something, not sure. I had heard this happens and people get money or other stuff for it, so I was the very first one to raise my hand and yell, "Me." They picked me and 2 other passengers, made us wait to see if they needed our seats or not, and then I saw the plane take off. So I stayed 3 nights in a luxurious hotel, all meals provided and some cash, plus another whole round trip Brazil-Japan. Arriving at the hotel, I saw 2 girls struggling with the language, so I approached them and helped. They were Korean, one only spoke Korean and G spoke English and Korean but 0 Japanese. After that we went for a walk around the hotel. G said she was not planning to come to Japan, but instead of going straight to the US from Korea, they made her fly through Japan and offered the VIP stay in exchange. The next day I was their tour guide here in Japan and we fell in love. Long distance relation that ended well and we got married. Lived happily ever after and blessed with 2 little Korean Brazilian girls living in Japan. Those were 6 heartwarming stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Again, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. See you.